Hi there, I'm Savannah Jones, and this is GMG's Bootstraps and Business. If you're going through a job transition right now or considering taking the leap, you'll want to listen to today's guest, Dave McDonald. He discovered his love of broadcasting early in his life and made a career out of it. Over 40 years in the industry, climbing the corporate ladder, getting to a place where he was comfortable. And then it was time to switch things up. He's going to get real about what it's like switching industries, and he shares some of those personal challenges that he faced during his job search. The big payout for you is he's open and candid about some of the strategies that did help him land his current executive role in the nonprofit world. Well, Dave, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. You're coming with a lot of knowledge in regards to broadcasting, but we're really going to jump into jumping industries because a lot of people, for personal reasons, COVID, pandemic reasons, have either made the choice to change careers and industries or involuntarily are making those kinds of
made for them.
Correct. So first, just tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, your background, and then we'll jump into your years in the industry and how everything has unfolded since then.
Well, great. I'm old enough that it might take a while. So,
we're here all day.
I've been in the Portland area since the mid-1970s, after having grown up in the Chicago metro in Northwest Indiana, one of 5 children, and a wonderful family with great parents that I'm very, very grateful for. I had a lifelong interest from the time I was in grade school in media, newspaper and television and radio. And the Chicago market was a great market to be exposed to those things, and a lot of terrific media there. I knew what I wanted to do from a really, really early age. I wanted to either work in newspaper or work on the radio. And I went on the air for the first time when I was 16. Had my first actual real paying job when I was 19 and kind of worked my way through college as a on-air personality. Working at rock stations while I attended the University of Kansas, where I majored in radio, TV, film. After that, I went to Vail, Colorado with a friend and posed as somebody who knew what he was doing and putting a couple of radio stations on the air, one in Vail and one in Steamboat Springs. Moved from Vail to Aspen and from Aspen to Portland. In Portland, I spent some time selling equipment to radio stations around the Northwest, from California to Alaska, back in the day when a lot of FM stations were signing on the air. This is the 70s now. And so AM was giving way to FM, and FMs were signing on a lot, and they needed a lot of equipment. So I spent some time doing that, but missed being in the radio station business. So went to work for Golden West Broadcasters in Portland, KEX, and at that time KQFM, now KKRZ. And in the sales department, and sold there and at Kink, and became a sales manager at KWJJ and at what is now Charlie 97.1. It was KCNR at the time. My call letters jumbled. Magic 107 was the next stop as a general manager. I was in my early 30s at that point, and continued as a general manager, moving to KUFO after 7 years, a big rock station of the 90s, along with a great alternative pop station called The Beat that we put on the air. Consolidation came to the radio business in 1996. Ultimately, CBS ended up with a bundle of radio stations that I ended up managing for them. And then I went to Seattle with CBS, came back to Portland with CBS as market manager in both of those markets. And then when CBS sold their Portland operation, they asked me to take the Las Vegas cluster of stations, which I did for nearly a couple of years. Left the company in 2010, didn't do very much for a while. And I missed being in the business, and I went to Entercom as the director of sales, which I did for 4 years, and left there in 2016. I was done with the radio business at that point, pretty much. The last few years to me weren't that much fun. And except for the people, of course, I love the local people and all that, but the business was struggling, and it was a mismatch of expectations. The industry was used to growing, and that was about the time the industry started to shrink in a rather dramatic fashion. So I didn't do very much for a couple of years again, and drove me crazy, and wanted to do something. And was doing a fair amount of whining to friends about my poor situation of being bored. And a search found me for the position I'm in now 3 years ago, which is executive director of Mount Hood Kiwanis Camp, which is a nonprofit that works for the benefit of people with developmental disabilities at our 22-acre camp up on Mount Hood. So that's what I've been doing for the last 3 years.
So that's your career in a nutshell. Lots of ups and downs in between, but I really want to talk about being in an industry. First of all, a volatile industry. Broadcasting is a volatile industry. That is a revolving door industry. I know. I was in it for over 20 years myself. How did you maintain the longevity in that industry? And then we'll jump off to some other things. But that's really important because that's a lot.
Yeah, it was a very competitive business. It really wasn't until I'd been in it a long time that I realized how competitive it was compared to other things. And I was very lucky to survive. A lot of it has to do with personal chemistry with the people that you're working for. Sometimes it's great, sometimes it's not. A lot of it has to do with the business results that you get. Sometimes it's to your credit, sometimes it's your fault, sometimes it's not. I guess I've always been a pretty flexible personality in dealing with others, and I lucked out working for some really, really fine folks along the way, who corporate types or owners, and not all of them were
gems.
Not all, but I was very, very fortunate that I worked with and for some really, really talented and gifted people along the way who were, bought my act. And I was in the business for 44 years. So,
well, you mentioned flexibility, but I also think in any career where you have that kind of longevity, you're also a risk taker because you made moves and you were open to probably stepping into something that was familiar but maybe uncomfortable. And so there's a lot of risk taking involved in continuing down that path, especially in management roles.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you have to understand, be willing to take action when action needs to be taken. A little experience helps in understanding the timing of that. And then it has to do with, convincing others around you to either convincing others around you to buy whatever it is that your idea is, or accepting the ideas coming to you from others. So I always just tried to surround myself with the very best people that I could in the specialties that they were good at. In the case of radio, it was programming folks who were great, salespeople and sales managers that were great, controllers, business managers that were great, and then give them the support that they need, listen to them, and try to stay out of the way. That was really my. That's the set of personal values that I sort of developed over time.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about those personal values, because that was one of the things that, yes, kept you in that industry for as long as you did, and changing roles. But it also helped you cross the bridge to new industries and a new career. So let's talk a little bit more about your personal values. Like when you get up in the morning and you go deal with your teams, you are you, and you bring you to the table. So tell us what got you literally through your entire career. What are your standouts, your core beliefs?
Well, I think that before embarking on a mission with a bunch of people, it's nice to have shared values, and it's nice to be clear with one another about what it is you expect from each other. And it's not a top-down kind of a thing. It's a collaboration, especially in a business like radio broadcasting, which, it's not like you're, making headlights or something. I mean, it's not a manufacturing deal. It's an idea thing. The world really never needed one, right? I mean,
we were selling air.
We're selling air and entertainment,
right?
The kind of the soft arts, and with regard to this nonprofit I'm running, the world also doesn't need it. It does terrific work for our campers, who are people with developmental disabilities, and the constituents that we serve benefit a great deal from it. But it's also another one of the soft arts. It's developing programs that the target audience is crazy about, and then executing to the best of your ability and satisfying the customers. So the values that I try to gain agreement on aren't really that hard to get agreement on. It's like, do what you say you will do, provide great customer service, and understand who your customers are. In the case of a radio station, in my view, it was listeners, advertisers, owners, and each other, and try to provide great customer service to the people that are around you. In my case, it was providing support for people who were better at their jobs than I was. And so that's a basic one. The other one is, treat others as you would like to be treated under similar circumstances. Don't get carried away with your own ego and be a top-down sort of a taskmaster type. And then finally, it's have fun and play to win. If you're going to go for it, go for it. Make sure you're having fun along the way, and try to make sure that the people who are working with you are having fun, because people who are having fun tend to want to do it more than people who aren't. And productivity's it kind of rests in that notion, I think.
Right. They'll stick around a lot longer too if they're having fun.
Right. And if they're having fun, it tends to be less about money. And you're always trying to, turn a profit, and you want to be fair with people. But that's another form of compensation, I guess I would put it that way, is the happiness of somebody in the workplace.
So company culture is a big deal.
Yeah, I think it is. It is.
So let's talk about making that transition from one industry to the next, and figuring out what you don't like, what doesn't work. How important is that?
I think it's huge. I mean, I think it's a really, really important thing to understand what it is that turns your crank and what doesn't. I was very fortunate to work in an industry my entire career that I loved. Not every moment of every day, but just in general, it was an industry that I found to be a lot of fun and creative, challenging, and all those things. I think a lot of people don't get to live life that way. And so I'm very grateful for that. There are certain things within the radio business that I liked better than others. And those are the things that I focused on. As I kind of reached the end of my radio career, I learned something about ageism. I still wanted to work. My mind was still active. I didn't want to work in the radio business. I had opportunities to do that, but I would have had to move, and I didn't want to do that. And I really was sort of done with it anyway. So finding something else, it was scary for me. It really was. It was very disquieting to not know what to do. And if you had a notion that you wanted to explore, to walk into a room and have people look at you like you have three heads because you're 65 years old. And so that's a real thing. And so finding something that is enjoyable is good. In the case of this position, it's back to a general management kind of a position. Once again, we have programs people, we have site and facilities people, we have people in development and communications. And, my job is to orchestrate that in a way that hopefully adds some value and keeps the mission alive.
Well, making that transition, again, back to finding out what you don't like. You and I both have had careers in broadcasting, and we did things that were fun every day. And when I got out of broadcasting, and here I am behind a microphone again, but when I got out of radio broadcasting, because I had been so deep into social media for so long, because that was part of the game, that was part of the deal from the beginning of time, because I was good at it and I knew it and I could do it, I thought, oh, well, then I'll just do that. And I found out, oh yeah, I don't like that at all. Like I did that. I was like, yeah, this is my path. And it wasn't my path. So you and I are talking about doing something that we enjoy for a long time and then having to make a switch. There are people that are getting out of high school, getting out of college, been working in the hospitality industry, and now with the pandemic, that went sideways and they're trying to figure out. So it's not only jumping out of industries and being in a career for a long time. People are having to make those decisions about what it is they like, what turns their crank. Mm-hmm. And I think, again, focusing on the things that you don't like, but you have to figure that out. And that's a process.
Yeah, it is. It is. I actually did try. I tried what is now known as inside sales. In a field that I didn't know anything about, and I had a really good time learning about a field I didn't know anything about. And then once that happened, I found that the day-to-day was repetitive. It was sort of the same thing over and over and over and over again. And I learned from that experience that that's not really what I want to do. I like dealing with people. We have a lot of, whenever you run a nonprofit, they're named that for a reason. It's hard, and it's not what you do to go relax after you retire. It's you're always trying to raise money, and you're trying to figure out how to make the mission survive and serve the people and all that. So it can be very, very challenging. That's for sure.
Well, let's talk about how you did get to the Mount Hood Kiwanis Club. Let's talk about all of the avenues that got you there. You had mentioned, you were whining to your friends about being bored and wanting to go to work. Well, that's one of them, that really is, and networking, so let's talk specifically about some of the things that really did help you, again, for the people that are displaced, making that transition or realizing they're where they don't want to be, and now they're going to make that step. And so what helped you get to where you are now?
I had to get used to not kind of putting up a false front that I was really happy. I had to get used to saying it out loud to people. I've not been, I don't like to complain a lot. And once I started opening up to friends who I should have been able to be open with all the time, discussions started. And I got together in some appointments that didn't work out, and that was fine. But at least the networking and the saying it out loud that I want to do something and I'm not sure what it is, led me to discussions that helped me narrow it down to, the other thing really is that I was in the same industry for a long time. I didn't know if I was any good really at anything else. Didn't know if the things that, if my skills translated to other situations. Turns out they do, in some ways, not completely, but in some ways. And so I think when someone finds themselves at that crossroad, it's important to say it out loud to the people that you know and love, and ask for help with it. Take meetings that you don't think are going to go anywhere. Just say it out loud. Ask a lot of questions. It's important to understand when you're like looking for a job or a new career or all that. It's not a one-way interview. It's not somebody interviewing you and deciding whether you're right for the position or not. That's half of it, but the other half is that you have a vote too, and it's the most important vote, because the last thing I want to do, I don't think I can add value to a situation that I couldn't have fun in, and that to me it's important that I understand what it is that moves me, and to interview the people who are interviewing me to find out who they are and what they value. Because there are some soulless and horrible organizations out there in the world that, even if you like the industry, aren't fun. And those that are fun usually are the ones that treat people with respect and kind of have those kind of values that I spoke about earlier.
Well, You and I spoke about this, prior to the interview, that you also use mentors, which I think is great. And explain what a mentor really is, because some people talk about it and it's kind of that ethereal person. Like, what does that look like to you, and what would that look like to somebody? Because a lot of people don't know what that means.
Yeah, I'm not sure I do either, except for I've had some really important ones along the way. And it was usually a supervisor, somebody I was working for. I had some terrific bosses in the radio business, and owners and whatnot, before consolidation and public companies took them all over. And in those companies, there were some terrific managers as well. And I think that finding someone that you respect the way they are, and what they do and their skill, and then asking questions, because most people love to answer questions. They really do. They want to talk about themselves. They want to pass along things that feel valuable to them. And so developing the skill or chutzpah or whatever it is to be able to ask questions so that you really get the answers. You don't walk out of an interview thinking, geez, how did I do? You really want to be strong enough to be able to ask the questions that you want to know the answers to.
Right. And I bring up the mentoring because when you and I talked, I kind of reflected back on my career, and I realized that it really turned out to be, there were several people along the way, but one in particular, is the one that got me on the path. I had already been in radio for several years, but this kind of solidified the deal. It was a big time job in Minneapolis, and my boss there just kind of laid it all out on the line, and he gave me a lot of rope. And this is kind of how I live my life. I like to give people a lot of rope, and it's either to hang themselves or save themselves. Yeah. And that's kind of the way I operate, because that's what he gave me. He gave me so much latitude, but also all of the information I needed to get to where I needed to go. It was just up to me to get there.
Right. It's hard to be, it's hard to grow if you're micromanaged, and it's great. And so when I think of mentors, I think of people who, give you honest feedback, and are there to answer questions, but also can stay out of the way a little bit and not have to take credit for everything. And so, I was, once again, I've said it before in our little talk here, but some of the folks that I worked for who were my supervisors were just sensational, and some of them I didn't think were going to be as I entered into it. There was an owner of a station that everybody said was a big meanie, and I got to know him, and it took several years before we talked about me coming to run one of his radio stations. And he was crazy, no question about that. But he also taught me more about business, really, than anyone I'd ever worked with. And he stayed out of the way, let me do my job.
Well, let's talk a little bit about where you are now. You're the executive director at the Mount Hood Kiwanis Club. So
Kiwanis Camp.
Oh, yep. Camp. Yes. And I actually know that, but I can't get it straight, but yes, camp. So let's talk a little bit about that. So we talked about your kind of, when you're making the transition, what were your transitional skills? And again, had a long career, but again, people who are just starting out are trying to figure out with little experience they have, what can I take from this party to the next? So what did you really bring to this position as the executive director? And tell us a little bit about the camp.
Well, thanks for the opportunity to do that. I think that, when I came in here, I had not had any experience working with people with developmental disabilities. I knew a couple of people. I knew a couple of families that had a child that had Down syndrome, for example, or was on the autism spectrum or something, those kinds of things where they had challenging environments, but I didn't have any direct experience. I had no training, and they didn't hire me for that. They hired me to, stabilize personnel a little bit. They'd had some turnover that they weren't crazy about. This is the board of directors. They needed someone who had a little background in projecting cash flow, to be able to look at a set of numbers and understand whether or not you could make payroll in 2 weeks. And so those were, radio is a small business, and that's what this is as well. And so a lot of my skills with regard to personnel management, budgeting and forecasting, um, uh, and uh, and the style I developed over time to not get in the way of the people who were doing programs was really, really important because I didn't know anything about them. So those were the things that helped me make that transition. There's a lot more similarities than I would have thought. It's just a different kind of programming for a different target audience. Is kind of one of the ways I look at it. But this target audience, our camp runs for 9 weeks. We've been in the same 22-acre site on Mount Hood since 1933. The camp transitioned in the mid-50s to serving people with developmental disabilities, a woefully underserved population, even now. And we have a partnership with Portland State, whereby a student can enroll in a capstone course that gives them 6 hours of academic credit in exchange for working at the camp for 2 weeks as a counselor in the summertime. And so the people that really benefit, the constituents that benefit from our activities are, first of all, the campers, because the camp has all kinds of activities that a lot of people wouldn't think would be practical for some people with the kind of disabilities that we serve. It's everyone from people with cerebral palsy, nonverbal, in wheelchairs, behavioral issues. There are a lot of, there's a full range of developmental disabilities and intellectual disabilities that we serve. A lot of people wouldn't think that somebody who utilizes a wheelchair could go down a zip line. They do at our camp. A lot of people wouldn't think that they could ride a horse. They do at our camp. We have a swimming pool. We have an adventure course that includes a zip line and a rock wall, and and all sorts of adaptive equipment that allow everyone to participate in virtually all activities. And so it's really empowering for our campers, many of whom are marginalized and face a population that doesn't think they can do anything. Turns out they can do stuff. And they find themselves in a 1-to-1 camper to counselor ratio. So they have plenty of support. And it's a really loving atmosphere that campers thrive in. Their self-confidence builds. They're doing stuff they never thought they could do. And that's great. The second piece is camper families. Families that have someone with a developmental or intellectual disability many times have very challenging lives. It can be a 24-hour-a-day kind of a job, and it's unrelenting. And so this is an overnight camp that most of the time when campers come up there, they've not been away from their families for more than a night or two their entire lives. And we serve campers from the ages of 5 to over 60 years old. So there's adult groups that look forward to this like it's Club Med every year. And families get respite from one another. We have one camper who was 21 the first year he came to camp, and he had not been away from his parents more than 2 nights in his entire life, and they have to take care of him. But they choose to take care of him 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365. That's the job that they got when this camper was born. And he went to camp. His father told me that he took the week off from work, stayed home, slept in his son's bed, and waited for the phone to ring to tell him he had to come up and get him because, we wouldn't be able to understand him. This is someone with cerebral palsy, nonverbal, fed through a tube, utilizes a wheelchair, and had a successful week at camp. His parents had 5 nights away from him, and vice versa, for the first time in their lives. And so it's campers and camper families that get respite. And then finally, it's these Portland State students who come in, most of whom have never had experience with working with people with these kinds of disabilities. And so they go through our training. It's very challenging. a lot of them, when they sign up for this class, it's sort of transactional. It's like, wait a minute, 2 weeks on Mount Hood and I get 6 credits? Really? I'll do that. And then they get there and realize it can be a pretty challenging thing. And when they're done, they go away with an understanding that we're all more alike than we are different. And that these are people who want to love and be loved just like anybody else and have fun. And that's what happens. And so over 5,000 students from Portland State over the years have gone out into the world with an understanding of people with developmental disabilities that they didn't previously have, and it changes them forever. So,
wow. So doing good things, putting good things out there.
Yeah, great. Really, it's a wonderful program. We've been, we were able to do it, provide our camp programming last year on a limited basis because of COVID. The previous year, not at all. And so figuring out a way to make the mission survive without gutting the staff, because this kind of a staff, you don't just put a 3x5 card on the bulletin board at Safeway and get qualified people to come in and take care of these campers and train the counselors and all that. So maintaining the integrity of our staff was very, very important, which we've done. And we just recently received approval from DHS and ODDS state regulators to have a full reopening of camp this summer. So we're very excited about it. Well,
2022 is going to be a great year for you guys.
We hope so. Yeah, we sure do.
Well, on that note, is there anything that you wanted to, we'll go back to the career advice, anything for anyone who is making that transition, or now back to 2022, here we go, things are starting to open up again. People are going to start looking for those dream jobs where they can have fun, find mentors, and grow into that next thing. Anything you want to leave that job searcher with?
No, I just think the most important thing, it's easier said than done, but it's to find something that gets you excited, where you don't have to drag your backside out of bed in the morning going, God, I got to go do this again. I mean, that's a terrible way to live a day, to my mind. And it's easier said than done. But back to your point of earlier, taking a risk, talking to people that you didn't think you would ever necessarily talk to. And I think that what people find is that most people will pick up the phone if you call them. They just will. Not everyone, but most people will, and most people want to communicate what it is that they know and love to people who ask them the questions. So learning how to ask questions, not being afraid to ask the questions of anyone is an important trait. And then trying to approach the day with some amount of happiness and enthusiasm is very helpful as well.
Every day, right?
Every day.
Well, Dave,
sometimes a real challenge, right?
Yeah, having been there, it really is. And I found it's to add to everything that you've said, it is a process. It doesn't nobody's on your time frame, so don't expect them to be. And one little step at a time, really just one little thing at a time. If you can do one little thing, that will eventually add up. I mean, I love grand gestures, I think, because they're nice and splashy and everybody gets to see it, but that doesn't always fly. But if you do one little thing at a time, you'll eventually get there.
Yeah, I think that's right. I agree with you.
Dave, thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate it. I love getting caught up.
Yeah, same here. And it's great to see you again. It's been too long.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, as always, for checking out DMG's Bootstraps and Business. If you'd like to find out more about our guests, DMG, or these podcasts, just check out the show notes. Thank you.